Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2023 Fall FedEx Fortinet Initial Research Show. Working title for the fall portion of the schedule. Working on that. It's going to be a mouthful, especially when you have the alliteration of Fall FedEx Fortinet. But the PGA Tour is back. That is the main takeaway here, and we are back for Calls. I am repping my favorite NFL team. As you can see, the green is not playing nice with the green screen behind me, so have a little fun at my expense with that, but I will take any flack from the community, as I am going to proudly wear this shirt after a week 1 win, and I might have been wearing this for someone special in chat who might reside in or near Chicago. But welcome to Calls. We are kicking off the fall portion of this special portion of the FedEx and the PGA Tour. It is not really the 2024 season, as that does not start until the Century Tournament of Champions, but it's not really the 2023 season either, as that ended with the Tour Championship 3 weeks ago. So we are in this little bit of a limbo area for the foreseeable future until the 2024 Century Tournament of Champions. But with that, there is still a lot of money to be had. With the majority of the country now focused on fantasy football, for the diehards out there who are willing to put in a lot of work and do some research on some Korn Ferry Tour guys or some lesser known names on the PGA Tour, there is a lot to exploit, and it's going to give us even more of an advantage when we move to the main portion of the golf schedule come 2024. So a lot to be excited for in the next few weeks. A lot of players are going to be playing for their PGA Tour card, essentially. A couple of big names at the Fortinet this week. Justin Thomas, probably the biggest name that is battling for a PGA Tour card. Billy Horschel, of course, the 2-time defending champion Max Homa is playing this week in preparation for the Ryder Cup, which will be next week, maybe 2 weeks from now. But we have a lot to get into for the Fortinet Championship this week, so let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter golf gambler and a much better golf DFS player. Go check out FantasyNational.com. You will not regret it. In the description to the video, there are links to all of my social media. Twitter, I'm going to keep calling it Twitter. I know it's X now. I'm in a habit of calling it Twitter. But Twitter, Instagram, and Kick are in the description. Twitter and Instagram are where I post research around the week's PGA tournament of the week. That'll be no different. Well, there will be some research out tomorrow around the previous winners of the Fortinet Championship, previously the Safeway, that's been played at Silverado the past few years, going back to 2014. So if you would like to see the research that I do on a weekly basis on the PGA Tour, give me a follow at your preferred social media site, Twitter or Instagram. Twitter is also where I place my betting cards weekly on the PGA Tour. That will be no different. Those come out every Wednesday evening after the DFS Tactics show. So if you would like to see the weekly wagers that I make on the PGA Tour, give me a follow over at Twitter. And speaking of Wednesday evenings, Gabe's Twitter handle is in the description as well. He writes a very good article called The Fringe. Highly suggest you go give him a follow and subscribe to that article, because every Wednesday evening after Calls, he is hosting a chat. We have been working together now for the past few months. A lot of success working together with two analytic minds, working back and forth but every Wednesday he is going to be hosting a chat to continue the DFS talk. And the only way you're going to be able to join that chat is if you are a subscriber to his article. It is a free subscription to his article, so I highly suggest you go do it. It's a very good read, very good way to get you prepared for the week ahead of the PGA Tour. So go show Gabe some support. Go follow him on Twitter and subscribe to that article over on Substack. It is free to do so. And then finally, we are live. Chat is open. Want to hear from you all. How did the Tour Championship go? Mine was okay. A little bit lackluster. Of course, Taylor Moore was my kind of big play. He ends up bottoming out, but I had a lineup that really salvaged everything in terms of financially with Xander and Wyndham Clark. A couple others that are escaping me at the moment. It's been 3 weeks now. But how did your Tour Championship go? Would love to hear about that. How do you think about this fall portion of the schedule, this kind of limbo area that we are in for the PGA Tour? Who do you think has the upper hand for the Fortinet? And of course, if you are having success, whether that is in fantasy baseball, fantasy football now that it's started, and you are a regular member of this community, please jump into chat. Let us know how you do. I would love to be able to shout out members of the community who have success. Does not have to be with golf, baseball, football, all of that good stuff, even basketball when it starts. So let me know how that goes. And also a quick reminder that I am now live streaming on Kick as well, YouTube. So 2 different places that you can enjoy my content, both over on YouTube, the main channel, if you will, and then I have started to live stream to Kick as well. Been doing that for a couple days now. Been having some fun with it, doing a little bit of gaming over there and whatnot. But we're not here for that. We are here for the Fortinet. So let's do our initial research for the 2023 fall FedEx Fortinet. And we are going to start over at the tournament fact sheet. Sorry, I am working on trying to get my 2 different chats in place where I can see them, both YouTube chat and the Kick chat. I apologize. Let me close out that file here real quick. We are in Napa, California, the traditional start of a PGA Tour season. But again, as I've mentioned, we are in this kind of limbo where this isn't the start of the 2024 season, but it's not really a part of the 2023 season either. Just kind of a standalone here until the new schedule takes effect. So we are in Napa, California at Silverado Resort, specifically the North Course, the customary start for the PGA Tour. Silverado is a par 72. Let me zoom in for you all just a little bit here. Par 72 that is a little bit misleading in terms of the listed yardage. It's listed at 7,123 yards. It is a shorter course. Make no mistake about that. But Fantasy National, as we will see when we move to Fantasy National, has actually labeled this course in between 7,200 and 7,400 yards each round the past 2 years. So I am a bit more hesitant to default to looking at short courses. We might do so just as a quick overview or maybe get an idea, generally speaking, of who plays short courses well. But as I mentioned, Fantasy National has listed this as medium length, or 72 to 7,400 the past few rounds or the past 2 or 3 years. Some other notable aspects of Silverado, it is originally a Ben Harmon design, but renovated by Robert Trent Jones and most recently by Johnny Miller in 2011. So no architect filter we are going to be looking at this week. The greens, 5,400 square feet, so just slightly under tour average. 20 acres of fairway. These fairways are generally pretty narrow. Even for a resort-style course, it is not the most generous of courses, as we will see in the scoring conditions. Not a lot of fairway, a little bit of rough, but the fairway it doesn't mean that this course plays difficult either. The rough isn't very penal, isn't very challenging to play out of, and most players don't really mind being in the rough if they prefer to hit driver on a lot of holes. Only 2 holes with water in play, not a lot of bunkers either, only 53. Really, the defense of the course is in the green complexes. They are elevated, generally, kind of undulating and slopey with some closely mown runoff areas. Think links style-ish in that regard around the greens and these green complexes. The green or the grass around Silverado, we are on Bent and Poa Annua, and there are a few courses that have Bent and Poa Annua on the PGA Tour, most notably Detroit Golf Club, the host of the Rocket Mortgage, and TPC River Highlands, host of the Travelers Championship. Those are the 2 courses that are mainstays on the PGA Tour that have a Bent and Poa Annua combination. Now, last year we had the Canadian Open, and I say last year, I mean this last season. This has only really been about 3 months ago, but last season the Canadian Open at Oakdale also featured Bent and Poa Annua greens, and the BMW. Sorry, I'm taking a look back here at my note. Olympia Fields for the BMW Championship also had Bent and Poa Annua greens. So there's a few tournaments we're going to be able to gain some statistics on, especially recently, to see how putting performance played for the players in the field if they played in those events, especially the BMW. But we are on Bent and Poa Annua on the greens. The fairways are a combination of Bermuda, Poa, and Rye. Very unique combination. I don't think I have seen that combination before. Now the rough is a traditional bluegrass and ryegrass combination. Again, not kept very long, only at 2.5. It's labeled at average length. There is a note here where the course routing has changed, so I am not going to be very familiar with that, but the holes in of themselves haven't changed, just the order that they're being played. But there's a look at Silverado from a GCSIA tournament fact sheet standpoint. Again, a little bit misleading in terms of yardage. You can definitely think of it on the shorter end, but I don't want to be narrowly focused on short courses. When we go to Fantasy National, you'll see that it's been labeled differently lately. Small-ish greens, just under tour average. Not a lot of fairway, but the rough is not very difficult to play out of, and we are on Bent and Poa Annua greens. So with that, we are now going to move to Fantasy National and the field for this week's Fortinet Championship. Of course, the 2-time defending champion Max Homa is probably the headliner in this field, along with Justin Thomas, who is quite a bit further down since I have got this sorted on strokes gained total. Cameron Davis, another fairly big name that is here this week. Sahith Tagala, the 4th big name, probably the big 4 this week in terms of the big names here in Napa. There's Justin Thomas there. So those 4 are the big headliners, probably highlighted by Max Homa. And you can see the performance of the players the past 36 rounds, as long as it's been within 2023. Let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of different things here. We'll go ahead and start with the short course. I don't want to put a whole lot of emphasis into it, but we are going to take a quick look at that. So, players who have played the best this calendar year, going back all the way to the Century in January. It's not a lot of rounds. Again, I don't want to put a whole lot of emphasis into it, but most players have anywhere in the teens to maybe low 20s in terms of rounds. So enough to get an idea of players who've played short course as well or not. So our top short course performers this calendar year: Eric Cole, Justin Thomas, Brendan Todd, Dylan Wu, Taylor Montgomery, Cam Davis, Mark Hubbard, Ches Reavie, Davis Thompson, and Ryan Gerard. There's your top 10 in terms of short course performance. We are going to go ahead and go straight into the course breakdown, as there's not a lot of filters that I'm comfortable with when we look at the historic conditions here in a little bit. But let's go ahead and jump into the course breakdown. The first thing that I like to do when looking at the course in terms of a scorecard, find the 9th and 10th most difficult holes. If par falls roughly around in there, you're going to be looking at an average difficulty course. Well, fortunately for us, the 8th most difficult and the 9th most difficult holes play right at par. So that would signify a little bit of a easier course, which you would expect from a resort style course. But this isn't going to play easy by any means. It's not going to be a birdie fest. You see these eagle rates, the highest being a 2%. You've got a 1.5, a little bit over 1.25. Not a whole lot of eagles here at Silverado. Decent birdie opportunities, especially the very short par 5 fifth. Plays to 4/10 of a shot under par, so a very good birdie chance. The par 5s are generally good birdie chances, 1/4 of a shot under par, 3/10, almost 1/3 of a shot. So certainly scoring is available, but there are some difficult holes here as well. The very difficult par 3 second plays to 15/100ths over par. You got 12/100ths, 15/100ths, a 10th. There are bogeys to be had here if you are not careful around Silverado. What length there is in the course does come in the par 5s. We have 3 par 5s that measure over 550 yards. You have 557, 571, and 575. But most of the course is going to play pretty darn short. We have a lot, and I mean a lot, of short par 4s we'll see here when we get to the hole composition. But there's a look at the scorecard. A pretty easy opening hole, or at least easy by the course's standards, and then Silverado really toughens up for 2, 3, and 4. The par 5s are very good birdie opportunities, not really eagle chances per se, but very good birdie opportunities. Overall, it's just about an average style difficulty course and tournament. Moving to strokes gained by shot type per round, I want to focus on the top 10s and the top 5s, really, as the short game is outweighing the ball striking, especially for the top 10s. You see the putting approach is a little bit lacking in terms of high-end success, but what's really telling is that the around the green is outweighing off the tee for the players who have finished in the top 10, leading to the short game preference. Top 5s, much more the same, although off the tee does catch around the green, but you still have putting and around the green holding their own and lending this to being a short game style course for the players that are in the top 10s and the top 5s. It does change for the winners, however. The winners have really been ball striking it. Think Brendan Steele. He's a 2-time winner here at Silverado. He is much more leaning into the ball striking. Max Homa, everyone's going to remember his miraculous chip in to win last year, but he does not get enough credit for the ball striker he is. So for the winners, it's been about the ball striking, but I really do want to put a lot of attention on these top 10s and top 5s because the around the green is going to play a pretty big part, and we'll see that throughout this week in Fantasy National, in the priority leaderboards when we go to the data dive tomorrow, and we're going to see it a little bit tonight in Microsoft Excel. The numbers will back that up. So there's a look at strokes gained by shot type. We move to strokes gained by hole by par, and one of the contributing factors that why this is not a birdie fest or very easy is that these par 5s aren't running away from the 3s and the 4s in terms of strokes gained. Even though this is a par 72, it has 4 par 5s. Yes, it's still the most important, but it's not by that much. Only 0.02 over the par 4s, and the par 4s and 3s are essentially even for the top 10s. Move to the top 5s, gets even closer. Now the par 3s fall off a little bit, but still pretty much the same type of distribution there. And then for the winners, they are going to be eagling a little bit on those par 5s, and the par 3s do fall off a little bit. So really, it doesn't appear to have any real standout in terms of par 5s being extremely important, or par 3s or 4s or anything like that. We're going to see that there are maybe 2 factors or 2 specific lengths of holes that we're going to want to focus on, and we'll see that primarily in Microsoft Excel. But there's a look at strokes gained by hole by par for your top 10s, your top 5s, and your winners. Moving to hole composition, again, backing up what I was saying earlier. Now, the par 3s, 3 of the 4 fall between 175 and 200. Then we have one long par 3 at 200 to 225. A little bit misleading, though. We do have the 197, which is very, very close to that 200 threshold. 212 right in the middle between, going under the 200 threshold or going to the 225. 182 and 189. So this 197 is a bit of an outlier, or can cause a little bit of misleading interpretation here. Really, I kind of think of it as 2 and 2 in terms of the par 3s. Now the par 4s, there's nothing misleading here at all. You have 3 very short par 4s that measure 350 to 400. Not drivable, but very short par 4s that put wedge in your hand. 6 par 4s that measure 400 to 450. So there is a bevy, and I mean 90% of the par 4s here are very short for PGA Tour standards, 350 to 450. We do have one longish par 4 measuring 450 to 5. Then the par 5s, you have one short par 5 measuring at 537, but the majority of the par 5s here measure 550 to 600. So there's a look at the whole composition. You can see where the majority of our focus is probably going to be throughout this week, and we're going to see how Microsoft Excel likes that data compared to other courses and whatnot. Approach shot distribution. Again, with the amount of short par 4s that are here at Silverado, it is no surprise to see these wedge distances be extremely inflated in terms of the amount of shots coming from there related to the tour, or in relation to the tour average. 10%, 75 to 100 at Silverado versus 6% for the tour average. The biggest discrepancy comes in the 100 to 125 range. 18.5% here at Silverado versus 12% for the tour average. So lots and lots and lots of wedges in your hands here at Silverado. And you would tend to think that it would lead to more easy or more, better scoring. Look at these cut lines. You did get to -4 back in 2021, but it's hovered in this -1 to -2 range. That is average in terms of difficulty. Again, these green complexes, they're smaller or small-ish, but they're pretty difficult. They have lots of break, lots of undulation. They're not easy. So it is not a birdie fest by any means. Scoring distribution, lots of birdies, very, very few eagles, very few. The bar is basically non-existent. A few bogeys, 14 or 13.8% or so. A little bit of doubles. So you do have more scores that are under par than over par. That's for sure. It is going to be on the easier end of the spectrum, but it's not going to be labeled easy, or at least it hasn't been for a while now. So there's a scoring distribution. Driving accuracy, I was mentioning this. The rough isn't very hard to play out of. It's not very challenging, so players really aren't all that concerned with hitting the fairway. So again, a little bit misleading. Driving accuracy is quite low here because players don't really mind. Green and regulation percentage, even with the amount of wedges that are in players' hands, it is only slightly higher in terms of green and regulation percentage here than the average tour event. Again, it's just speaking to some of the difficulty of hitting these greens. Scrambling percentage also higher here than the average tour event, meaning it's not as difficult to scramble here than some other places. 3 putts per round, just due to the nature of these small greens, less than the average tour event. Driving distance, due to the fact that players aren't scared to be in the rough, distance is higher here, not by a lot, but a little bit. And then proximity is right at tour average. So there's a look at Silverado from a scorecard and graphical view here in Fantasy National. Before we go to our player page view again, let's take a look at the historic conditions just very, very quickly. And to back up what I was saying in terms of the scoring, you see 3 of the 4 rounds last year played to average. 3 of the 4 rounds the year prior played to average. So 6 of the 8 have played to average. And speaking to what we were talking about in the GCSA tournament fact sheet, Fantasy National for the past 3 years, I thought it was 2, the past 3 years, has labeled every single round over 7,200 yards, even though the listed yardage is 7,123. So a little bit cautious in doing short courses because of this. Now, going back to 2020, you had it be short. 2019 was labeled short. But really, there have been a few easy rounds. But really, it's been average in terms of difficulty. Now, 2021 was very easy. That is when the winning score got to -21. That is the lowest it has been since the Safeway, or now the Fortinet, moved to Silverado back in 2015. I might have said 2014, but 2015. But even so, I mean, you've had a few difficult rounds, but mostly average in terms of difficulty. And you can see the difficulty with labeling these greens since they are bent and Poa Annua. Fantasy National started labeling them as Poa and then has labeled them as bent the past 3 years. Fortunately, again, thanks to Gabe, who has given me the information regarding specific green surfaces, the courses that match Silverado in terms of bent and Poa Annua. So we'll be able to look at that specific surface comparatively. Again, rough length, average, always generally has been. Now these greens have always been labeled as average on in terms of Fantasy National, but last year they did get to fast. So I'm probably just going to look at bent and Poa Annua combination, the courses. if you want to play the percentages, you would probably want to look at average speed, bent and Poa annua, but I'm just going to be looking at bent and Poa annua. But there's a look at the Fortinet and Silverado historically in terms of conditions, and that's why I'm not going to be too comfortable using the easy to par filter or any specific, say Poa or bent in terms of green surfaces, no speed, and why I wasn't too terribly confident in using the short course filter, because for the past 3 years it has been listed as above 7,200 yards. So going back to the player page view, we'll take a look at a few things here. We'll still look at strokes gained approach, but we're really going to want to be looking at around the green and especially putting. So in the past 36 rounds this calendar year, the top strokes gained approach players in the field this week in Napa, California: Ches Reavie, Mark Hubbard, Sam Ryder, Kevin Roy, Kevin Streelman, Charlie Hoffman, Doug Gim, Ted Potter, J.J. Spawn, and Christian Bezadenhout are your top 10 in terms of strokes gained approach players. So it's interesting to not see Max Homa. Of course, Justin Thomas has struggled, but he's up here at 15th. Tagala, generally not a strokes gained approach player. Cam Davis not up here. So none of the big four are up here in terms of strokes gained approach. Instead, we're going to look at strokes gained around the green. Our top strokes gained around the green players the past 36 rounds in the field this week: Aaron Baddeley, Brendan Todd, Alex Noren, Jonathan Bird, Matthias Schwab, Harry Hall, Ricky Barnes, Kevin Streelman, Austin Cook, and Davis Thompson. And then finally, let me grab the specific courses for the putting that we want to look at. Gosh dang it. We first want Detroit, host of the Rocket Mortgage. That is bent and Poa annua. Then we want Oakdale, the host of the Canadian Open this past summer. Olympia Fields, the host of the BMW Championship last month. Two more. We do want to look at Silverado, and we'll get a more specific look at Silverado when we move to Microsoft Excel a little bit later in the show, but we will bring in Silverado. And lastly is TPC River Highlands, host of the Travelers. Those are the 5 courses in the past, say, calendar year that have had bent and Poa annua as the green surface. And very few rounds, but if you want any immediacy or who is hot with their putter on this specific surface, the top putters on bent and Poa annua this calendar year have been Peter Malnati, Brian Gay, Justin Lauer, Eric Cole, Lucas Herbert, Saying You'll Know, MJ Duffy, Sam Ryder, Sahith Tagala, and Zach Johnson. Again, very, very small sample size here. I'm actually going to bring this all the way back out to 2019, which happens to be a pretty good cutoff because that is when Detroit first started on the PGA Tour. We do have 36 rounds from the majority of players. I wonder if I bring in all rounds, wonder how many that goes up to. 52, most have in the 40s. I don't think that's too much, just to give us an idea on who putts this surface well. Of course, you still have a few players that have not putt on this surface or haven't played those tournaments, and a few players that haven't played those tournaments many times at all. But going back to 2019, a more historical view, the best putters on bent and Poa annua in the field this week: Kevin Kisner, Mark Hubbard, Bo Hostler, Bryce Garnett, Sahith Tagala, Justin Lauer, Eric Cole, Zach Blair, Adam Long, and MJ Duffy. So quite a bit of overlap between the historical and the 2023 bent and Poa annua putting. Particularly, I remember Bryce Garnett, Sahith Tagala was in the top 10 for 2023 as well. I believe Justin Lauer, Eric Cole was just outside the top 10 in terms of historically saying you'll know, but he was in the top 10 for 2023. So quite a bit of overlap there. And those are probably players you want to put a star next to or have in the forefront of your mind at the beginning of this week, because putting is going to be a pretty big deal when we move to Microsoft Excel. I will show you. But that's going to do it for kind of a broad view look at Silverado. We'll take a look at let's take a look at par fours. Par fours 400 to 450, just to get kind of an overview look, if you will, before we move to Microsoft Excel, because this is going to be one of the more important facets of the week. So our top performers on par fours, 400 to 450 yards in the past 36 rounds. Let me narrow that in. So in the past 36 rounds, our top performers on par fours, 400 to 450 yards: Bo Hostler, Stefan Jaeger, Doug Gim, Brendan Todd, Akshay Bhatia, newly engaged Akshay Bhatia, in case you hadn't seen that news, most recently engaged, Max Homa, Garrick Higo, Andrew Putnam, Cam Davis, and Cody Gribble. There's your top 10 in terms of par fours, 400 to 450 yards. Normally, we close out the Fantasy National portion of the initial research show with the tournament history. However, it is not being populated at the moment. The tournament history being the strokes gained total tab, performance at that course over the past 5 years. Not to worry, though. I do have the early look file ready to go. But first, we're going to start with the comparison course. So let me bring that up for us very, very quickly. And I will also bring up the Fortinet early look. Looks like Microsoft Excel's having a bit of trouble loading up. So, bring the course evaluation, and let me bring up the early look for the Fortinet. Have that ready to go for us. Okay. Let me change the view for you. And I also need to bring back Kick Chat. Okay. I will try to zoom in a little bit since we're going to be focused on this top line here for the Fortinet. You see, against other courses, the Fortinet really doesn't favor the ball strikers. In fact, 23% less important strokes gained approach here than at the average full field course on the PGA Tour. Excuse me, full field consistent course. Places like the CJ Cup, the Zozo, I do not include them. They are not full fields. Places like the Canadian Open generally changes venues. The PGA, the Open, the US Open, they change venues. So I'm just comparing against other full field consistent courses on the PGA Tour. Please note that. But it does not really promote ball striking. Instead, you see around the green, 36% more important for the players who finish in the top 30 here at Silverado. Putting is at 11.5%. That doesn't seem like much, but remember, there are a few other courses that have bent and Poa annua. And I want you to see the commonality between those courses. So the Fortinet is one of the three that has bent and Poa annua, that is consistent on the PGA Tour. The others are Detroit, the Rocket Mortgage. You see its putting is emphasized double digits in terms of percentage points, 10% here. The third is the Travelers, TPC River Highlands. Notice its emphasis on putting, 10.5%. All three of the bent and Poa annua courses promote putting, or it's one of the biggest indicators to success. Now, 2 of the 3 also emphasize the around the green. The Rocket Mortgage does not emphasize the around the green, but Travelers does and Silverado really does. But all 3 of these Bent and Poa annua courses emphasize the putting. All of them are double digits in terms of percentage more important than the average full field course. So, I mean, if it was 1 or 2 of them, okay, maybe, but with those 3 being the 3 consistent courses on the PGA Tour, and they're all promoting putting at roughly the same level, and the Canadian Open from this past summer, when it was played at Oakdale, really emphasized the putting. I don't think that's a coincidence. So I think we're going to have quite a bit of emphasis on putting this week. Moving across here, we're going to look at driving and greens. You see, even though the distance is higher here, it's not mandatory. Your plotters or your fairway finders can still have success here. So distance minus 42% is just not a big emphasis. But you don't have to hit the fairways either. That's why off the tee is not really one of the focal points of Silverado. Neither the distance nor the fairways gained are all that big of a deal. Good drives gained slightly. We move to greens in regulation. Not really a big factor at all, which is kind of showing you why the around the green is having such the emphasis. If distance doesn't matter, if fairways don't matter, the greens really don't matter, then we're going to be looking at putting. We're going to be looking at strokes gained around the green. Perhaps some, maybe not some scrambling, maybe so. We'll have to see. It's a little difficult to do scrambling because we don't get scrambling in terms of historical data from tournaments from Fantasy National. Not a lot of insane saves. There's not a lot of bunkers here. It's just more around the green in general. Looking at the scoring, again, it tends to play on the easier end, but you see here, birdies not emphasized, or birdies gained not emphasized, bogeys avoided not really emphasized. Lots of pars at this course, and you're trying to string together more birdies than bogeys. I mean, obvious statements are obvious, but some places are birdie fests. This really isn't one of them. Moving into pars 3s, 4s, and 5s, we saw this graphically as well. Really, the par 3s just overall pretty darn mitigated. 17% overall, less important. No particular range has a lot of emphasis. The 2 ranges that the par 3s fall into are the ones that are the most important, compared to other full field courses. But even then, they are still, negative in terms of importance. So not a lot to do with the par 3s this week. Instead, we're going to be looking at par 4s, and specifically, again, the 350 to 4 and 400 to 450. 26% and 32% respectively. More important than the average full field course on the PGA Tour. This is where a lot of the elite players, or players who have played the Fortinet well, tend to gain a lot of strokes on their competitors. These range of par 4s, especially since 90% of the par 4s fall into this range here at Silverado. Not to be ignored, the par 5s, really, we're just kind of looking at one range. It's the 550 to 6. There's only one par 5 that measures under 550. It's at 537. So you can envision that playing above 550 some, but the majority of par 5s will play between 550 and 600 here at Silverado. So we're only going to be looking at that range this week. And there's the data to show that. Going into proximity. Looks like prox total really isn't all that much, but look at the 2 ranges where have the most common approach shot length comes from. These wedges, these 75 to 100, 100 to 125, they are above full field course averages, especially the 75 to 100, 30% more important here versus other courses. Only 5% on the 100 to 125, but I still think it's useful to look at. So when we go into the data dive tomorrow and focus on the prior leaderboards, we'll see how the proximities look, particularly with these two ranges. I am curious to see how this looks with these prior leaderboards, 75 to 100, and only because it caught my eye, or caught the corner of my eye here. We talked about how putting is going to be a pretty big deal, but the short putts, not really all that much. 10 to 15, 15 to 20. Look at the 20 to 25, 41%. That could be an outlier, but that's a pretty big number there. In terms of 20 to 25. The vision's going to be skewed. I apologize. Let me bring up Fantasy National again. Go back to the course breakdown. Because at the very, very bottom, they have a distance of birdie putt made chart. Getting a little bit cut off here, but this is 0 to 5 feet, 5 to 10. Nothing is too out of line, really. I would have thought maybe the 20 to 25, which my big self is blocking. I thought maybe that might be more graphically showing here, but it's not. So I wanted to check that really quickly. Apologies, quick tangent on that. So we might take a look tomorrow in some of the putting. Might do that a little bit of my research tonight and tomorrow morning. But there is a look at Silverado and the Fortinet compared to other full field courses on the PGA Tour. Tomorrow we'll really go into the detail. I saved that for the Data Dive show. But we're going to round the show off as we normally do on a Sunday evening with the early look file. And this is performance specifically at Silverado going back 5 years. So 2022, 21, 2019, and 18. Normally I only go back to 2019. I say 2018, it was the 2019 season. Just remember, the Fortinet is generally the start of a PGA Tour season. So it really was calendar year 2018 with the 2019 season. Anyway, this is performance specifically at Silverado going back to the 2019 season, 2018 calendar year. The number of times they've played the Fortinet, their average finish, the times they've missed the cut. What I like to do, I want to grab players that have played this very frequently. So I'm going to grab only the players that have played the Fortinet at least 3 of the 5 years. Because if they've only played it once or twice, it can lead to some pretty big outliers. You don't want to ignore them, but I want to see generally who has played the best at the Fortinet year over year, and what statistics, what metrics they've really been performing at. Now, the first thing that jumps out to me, for the players who have consistently played the Fortinet, talking at least 3 times, the best average finish is 22nd. That would tell me that this course is somewhat volatile. That means it doesn't lend itself, there's no horse for course per se. Some places like Wyndham, these like Sedgefield, you think Webb Simpson, you think Kevin Kisner. Some longer courses, you think Victor Hovland and Wyndham Clark. This doesn't seem to lend itself to any one particular player. We'll say Max Homa, 4 for 4, average finish at 31st. It's pretty solid. Cameron Percy, 4 for 4 average finish at 30th. But pretty volatile here, considering the best is a 22nd of players who have played it at least half of the 5 years. You can see off the tee, not a big factor at all. Let's go down to, that's only 9 players. Let's go to players who have averaged top 50. That doesn't sound very good, but again, this looks to be pretty volatile. So players who have averaged the top 50 and have played at least 3 of the 5 years, that's 14 players. The off the tee is a 0.2. So not very important at all. Several players negative. What is interesting to see is that the strokes gained approach is actually a pretty significant number. Nobody is negative in strokes gained approach, even though they appear to be mitigated, or approach appears to be mitigated in performance. This is a 1.7. That's pretty big. Around the green, you have a lot of players positive, just not big numbers. Now, you do have a bad number here from Kevin Stroman, which is interesting to see because he's generally a good around the green player. And you have a negative from Max Homa. Other than that, everybody is positive. So that's what's contributing to the pretty high around the green number. This is only a 0.7, but again, it's the fact that 12 of the 14 here are positive in around the green. And putting, we only have 2 that are negative, and these are much larger numbers. So this is really going to emphasize the putting aspect here. Players who have averaged a top 50 the past 5 years at Silverado and have played it consistently. This is a 1.6, so slightly under the approach. But you have some big numbers here, 4.1, 3.8, 3.4. Let's see, Max Homa, your 2-time defending champion. See, Tagala's played this well. I'm going to cheat. Let's look at some of these winners here. Stuart Sink, Cameron Champ, a bomber. Kevin Tway is the literal opposite of a bomber. He has to hit every fairway. Steele is a ball striker. Grillo's generally a ball striker. So different styles of play can win here. So let's see. Homa, Sink, Champ. We're only going back to here. So Homa, Sink, Champ, Tway. Homa, Sink, Champ, and Tway. Don't see any of them. There's, obviously Homa. There's Kevin Tway. Okay, so he has missed the cut 3 of the past 5 years here, but he's a former winner. So again, speaking to the volatility. Cameron Champ, only 2 for 4 the past 5 years, a former champion, speaking to the volatility. So it is interesting to see that the approach, nobody is negative in terms of strokes gained approach who has played Silverado well, but a pretty big emphasis on the putting there. Look at the distance. It's negative, and a lot of players are fairly deep into the negative, so it is not mandatory at all to contend here. In fact, really not really a lot of these are jumping off to me in terms of jumping off the page to me in terms of driving and greens. Fairways, not necessarily needed. You got several players negative here as well. It's a 1.0. It's not very high for fairways gained. Good drives gained might be something. You only have 2 players negative. Only 2 negative. So maybe good drives gained. Maybe. Not completely sold on that. Looking into scoring. Again, not a whole lot jumping off the page to me. You do have 1 player negative in birdies gained. Nobody negative in bogeys avoided, but you got much larger numbers in the birdies gained. So this is a 1.4, 1.2, so pretty even. You would expect that if it's an average difficulty style tournament. And you can see why Max Homa has won. He's just getting eagles where most players just aren't. And I would not count on that. I'm definitely not going to have that as a factor this week. Par threes, very little in terms of numbers here, and a 3.5 from Zach Blair's fine, I guess, but overall that's a 0.6. A lot of yellow, even some orange. Instead, go to the par fours. Nobody negative in terms of par fours. We've got only one player negative in 350 to 400. Okay. Only one player negative in terms of 350 to 400. Interesting to see. 0.9. This is a 1.1. You have three players negative in terms of 400 450, but one's at a negative 0.2, one's at a negative 0.1, so really it's only one player negative. Okay, so again, just emphasis on the links of the par fours here, and then a couple more things, and then we'll finalize the show. Par fives, all of it you see in the 550 to 600. Yeah, only one player negative in 550 to 600. And it's making up the majority of these players' total par fives. Yep. Okay, this is pretty big. I'm glad I came over here and looked at this. Look at this prox 75 to 100. Yes, these numbers aren't large, but they aren't going to be because you're very close already. Almost everybody is positive from 75 to 100 who has played Fortinet the best or played Silverado the best in the past 5 years. Almost everybody is positive, and the one player that's negative is really darn close to field average. So the players are going to have to be very dialed in from 75 to 100. Those are some players that we're going to want to focus on, I think, this week. 75 to 100, the putters, particularly the good putters on Bent and Poa annua. So I remember Mark Hubbard, I remember Sahith Theegala was very high on putting Bent and Poa annua. Trying to think of others here that were very high on Bent and Poa annua. I think that might be the only two off the top of my head. So there's a look at the Silverado and the Fortinet Championship from a initial look style of view. That's going to do it for the show tonight. Tomorrow, be on the lookout on social media. I will be posting some research around the form of the previous winners here. Max Homa the past 2 years, Stuart Sink, Cameron Champ. I'll show the winner matrix here, go into it in some detail tomorrow for the Data Dive show. But that's going to do it for the show tonight. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, watching, listening, supporting the channel. Hopefully you had a very good Tour Championship, had some good time off. Your fantasy football seasons started well if you play fantasy football, and that you are ready for the PGA Tour season to come back around, the PGA Tour to start, and put in a lot of work. We're going to gain a lot of knowledge, insights this fall to use over our fellow contestants in these DFS contests, and we're going to try to find some winners this fall as well. Thanks for all the support. Again, quick reminder that I am over on Kick periodically now. So if you want to see some other style content, gaming, just relaxed, music going in the background, be sure to give me a follow over at Kick and be on the lookout for the research tomorrow. For all of the wagers that you are going to think about making so far this week for the Fortinet Championship, for all of the Tour Championship contests and wagers that you made a couple weeks ago, for all your fantasy football drafts and week 1 contests, whether that is in leagues or in DFS. And until I see you tomorrow night for the Data Dive show, may all your bets be profitable.